Okay, so this video is designed to help you check your answers to the misplaced modifiers exercise, and I have done some highlighting of the exercise ahead of time so that you can see that there are two types of modifiers. We have modifiers in green that are multiple words. They can be, as the video or the PowerPoint showed you yesterday, they can be multiple words. They can be phrases, as in visiting the coast. Here is in the first example. This is a phrase, not a clause. A clause would involve both a subject and a verb. Here we just have a verb phrase. But we also have these one-word modifiers in the blue, and in the examples in blue down at in the exercises. But we'll look at this example at the top where we have visiting the coast, which in the example of a misplaced modifier at the top of the page is misplaced because next to the guest houses in the sentence tourists can stay in guest houses visiting the coast, the visiting the coast describes the guest houses. And repositioning visiting the coast to be closer to the tourists who are actually doing the visiting is the correction so that we have a clearer understanding of who exactly is visiting the coast. The correction of the sentence now reads, tourists visiting the coast can stay in guest houses. Our general rule, or the overriding rule that you may use when you are thinking about repositioning these misplaced modifiers, is you'll want to place the misplaced words as close to what they modify or what they describe as you can get them, or as close as possible. So I'm writing this rule for you. This is something that you can use today and you can use on an error analysis if you need to. We'll want to place those misplaced words, as close to what they describe. That's another word for modify. As possible. And I'm just going to write POS, and that's an abbreviation for possible. So we'll practice this as we go through the examples where we have words or phrases in green. We have in the blue sweater as close to speeding in the first sentence, which makes it seem like we have a man speeding in a blue sweater. But repositioning that, or having it as close to the man as possible, now shows us that the man in the blue sweater was stopped for speeding. In number 3, carved on the tree makes it seem like the lovers are carved on the tree, when in fact we know that it's their initials that were carved on the tree. So following that rule of placing those misplaced words as close to what they modify or describe as possible, now has us with a sentence that is more clear. The initials carved on the tree were those of the lovers. While we might like to think that a doctor would be able to call us every 4 hours and tell us to take our medicine, it's unlikely that she or he would be able to do that. Instead, maybe a parent or some other caregiver may do the reminding or even setting a reminder on your phone. But it's not a doctor who's going to tell you to take a pill every 4 hours. Moving that phrase will better position that every 4 hours so that the taking of the medication is better placed after pill. In 6 and 7, you have two similar phrases. You have phrases that begin with gerunds, in wearing and in carrying. There are two different ways that you could reposition these phrases. One is to put the phrase after who it describes or what it describes. We could do that with carrying 155 passengers and put it after the jet, or we could do it after the woman. So you'd have a woman wearing a feather hat walk towards us, or a jet carrying 155 passengers crashed into the cliff. But another possibility is taking this phrase and putting it out front as an introductory element, an introductory phrase, so that you'd have wearing a feather hat, the woman walked towards us, or carrying 155 passengers, the jet crashed into the cliff. Those are alternatives to how you may have gotten those misplaced words as close to what they describe as possible, before or after the woman or the jet. In number 10, if we bounce down there, we have that was broken, describing a neighbor. And it's really the mower that is broken, so we'd need to reposition that. So we borrowed a mower that was broken from a neighbor. In number 11, it's unusual to think that a fireman would start a fire. And so we have really the rescue being done by a fireman. The cat was rescued by a fireman after the building had been set on fire. That would better reposition by a fireman to describe what it really would be describing. In 13, if you were someone who needed to get your car fixed by a mechanic, it's likely then that you would feel admiration for the mechanic, or you could watch with admiration as the mechanic fixed the car. And then in 15, the reason for maybe the confusion or the uncertainty is that we don't know which is green. Is it the bridge or is it the car? If in fact your car is green, you'll need to get that modifying phrase as close to what it modifies or describes as possible. So the car which is green on the bridge is mine. In the case, though, of these one-word modifiers, these single-word modifiers, the need for repositioning is going to be a little bit more specific. We are going to want to still have those modifying words be as close to what they describe as possible, but I'm going to recommend that we place these one-word modifiers after the verb. And the reason for this comes in an example that we can see in this example about Luke only dating blondes at the top of the page. And if we were to really think about the meaning of this sentence, Luke only dates blondes at the top of the page, this example of a misplaced modifier, what this sentence really tells us is that the only thing that Luke does is date people with blonde hair. Luke doesn't sleep, Luke doesn't eat, Luke doesn't exercise, Luke doesn't see friends, Luke doesn't do any schoolwork, etc. But the only thing that Luke does, it's as close to what it modifies as possible, but it makes the dating of the blondes exclusive to what Luke does. If what we really mean is that when Luke dates, Luke has a preference for people with a certain hair color, then we want to put this one-word modifier after the verb. And that's a simple fix in most of these sentences. It wouldn't necessarily be something that we'd have to do in number 4, because number 4 is the sentence that was correct on this page. If you notice that this one-word modifier only occurred after the verb, and then showed us that we had parking spaces that were left in this parking lot existing of only 2, then we would understand that there were things in the parking lot other than just parking spaces. We would have maybe sidewalks and some landscaping and maybe some lighting and other cars. So this sentence in number 4 was or is correct. The other sentences, though, require that we would have to move those one-word modifiers to after the verb. So I saw almost the whole movie. Not that I almost saw. I wasn't maybe turning my head or standing outside of the theater and saw just a bit of the movie, but I saw almost the whole movie and then fell asleep around midnight. That's going to place the one-word modifier after the verb. If I didn't eat much for breakfast, I had a small breakfast, then I ate barely any breakfast in number 8. And if in earning money, I total very little and maybe earn not even $50, then I earn scarcely $50 a week. I'm going to place that one-word modifier after my verb. I want to take this word almost in number 12 and put it after my verb. So it's not that I'm on some kind of scavenger hunt for a lost puzzle piece, but I'm nearly done with my puzzle and I've found almost all the puzzle pieces. And then finally in number 14, I have Kimberly who drove the car nearly 8 hours to get home. We want to get that one-word modifier after the verb, and then it's a combination of placing the misplaced words as close to what they describe as possible. So the nearly describes that it's almost 8 hours to get home. After checking your answers, you can take the check for understanding today.